So I wouldn't actually, in this case, if I compare with the July and 2016 April events, I would say that the international media is actually covering this conflict much more right now, and they're actually not afraid to call aggressor, I would say. So even today, the media has been reporting already about Emmanuel Macron's reaction to this event. He called Turkey to refrain from encouraging Azerbaijan to retake, as they say, by force, what they think belongs to them. So yeah, I would say that the international media is covering quite well. With difference to Armenia, Azerbaijan blocked the internet entirely. Now social media, there people are only allowed to read what's happening by the governmentally approved sources. They closed their borders to all journalists, even to Russian journalists as well, as there have been many Russian journalists before to cover the event. Only the journalists that are affiliated to Erdogan's government are allowed to enter Azerbaijan and report. No independent journalists also in Azerbaijan. Several activists, in fact, have been jailed on Monday for calling for peace in Azerbaijan. And this has been reported by several independent media sources, including some Turkish sources.
Interesting. Excuse me. I know Andrew very thoughtfully put down some suggestions possibly for us to discuss. And I think the first one was what is happening on the ground in Upzak right now.
On the ground in Artsakh, as many fear to call it, is war. What is happening is fully fledged war. So it's a war on the entire front line between Artsakh and Azerbaijan. Actually, on Monday and yesterday, Vartanish city, which is lying on the very eastern part of Armenia, so eastward from Lake Sevan, southeast of Lake Sevan, bordering Azerbaijan, came under fire attack of Azeri forces. And also there's a lot of information about Turkey using F-16 fighter jets. And there were news that these fighter jets are attacking the internationally recognized borders of Armenia. So civilians and a bus came under the attack, and people died yesterday. So I would say that alongside the fully fledged war, there is also a huge humanitarian crisis coming in, because the Azeri side does not differentiate between combatants and non-combatants, as it should under Geneva Conventions and international humanitarian law. A few hours ago, the Armenian government announced that the city of Martakert came under fire and 3 civilians died. So there is a lot of civilian casualties, wounded and dead, as well as infrastructure that has been destroyed, which is very worrying, alongside with the really unprecedented amount of weapons that are being employed in this fight.
And obviously there are two very different things, not in human terms, but in political terms, to attack the Armenians in Artsakh, a disputed territory, and to attack Armenians in a sovereign state. Yes. And that's been emphasized because Turkey and Azerbaijan make themselves much more vulnerable to serious international criticism if they actually attack Armenia itself.
Yes, indeed, there is really a huge difference between these two, although in humanitarian law terms, there is no difference between that. So attacking civilians wherever civilians are is unallowed, be it disputed or undisputed territory. As with regards to your remark about this being actually different in terms of international reactions, until today in the morning, when the French president made the statement, it was only Cyprus that condemned this aggression against Armenians in Artsakh and also as a whole on Armenia. Only the Foreign Minister of Affairs of Cyprus and also Greece condemned. Almost all international stakeholders that have the power to put pressure to end this and end this human suffering are refraining to use words like we have to stop the aggressor. They're preferring to use more neutral stance, so-called both-sidism. You know, we're calling the parties to immediately de-escalate and this kind of wording, which is literally a copy-paste. So you can take that text from wherever you want without even mentioning the, you know, parties. So we're calling the parties, you're calling the side that is defending to not defend itself. So this call should be directed against the side that started it and the side that is intensifying. So every time we're hearing news about Azerbaijan employing even bigger weapons, even larger weapons, causing, which if they're employed and they're being employed, these weapons can cause really massive distractions infrastructure-wise. So if the adversary is using such weapons, you have to also use the, you know, the equal amount of weapons to defend yourself. So this kind of international reaction from OSCE, from European Union, you know, from the United States, although the United States from the first day made a statement calling on any third party to refrain from entering the conflict, implicitly referring to Turkey. Yesterday, Joe Biden also made a statement explicitly saying that Turkey should not get involved in this conflict and not add fuel to fire. So I would say that international reaction should really not be afraid. International community should not be afraid to call the situation as is and to really put political pressure, diplomatic pressure to bring parties back to the table to negotiations and end the human suffering. And as I said yesterday and the day before, we had attacks within the international recognized borders of Armenia, but the international reaction remained the same almost.
Yeah. So do you have any latest figures on statistics of how many Armenians, civilians have been injured and killed in Upzak and Armenia?
So the official data as of yesterday of killed is a little bit under 100 people. So probably 80 people, if I'm not mistaken, as of yesterday.
80 Armenians?
About in Armenia, yes. This is the official data. About wounded, of course, we have probably more than 200 wounded people that are in the hospitals. But luckily, the health situation is not very bad. So those that are wounded are recovering fast.
So it's not made much worse by COVID?
There's no data about COVID being involved within this, the casualties of the war. COVID is COVID, and yeah, recently we had slightly more numbers per day, but it's still under control, I guess.
That's something to be relieved
but
about.
Of course, considering also, I would like to refer to the call of General Assembly of the United Nations when COVID pandemic started. All the countries except Azerbaijan endorsed this announcement of the UN Secretary General to keep ceasefire while we're struggling, while we're fighting the invisible enemy, except Azerbaijan. And in fact, when Azerbaijan unleashed the clashes in July, a lot of people referred to this call and referred to the fact that they didn't endorse this, but as you can see, it didn't stop to restart within 2 months.
Just going through the little list of questions that Andrew kindly prepared, one of the points he made is that the British media are saying that Armenia started this. How do you answer that? I mean, we don't believe it, but how do you respond when people say it to you?
I'm not, I guess I haven't read the British news, and I haven't read the British news saying that. I'm more following the international news. The very British news, I'm not. But I guess there is a really huge propaganda of from Azerbaijan to declare that, and this is what their state position is as well, that they are defending themselves, they are not attacking. It was Armenia that attacked, and they're just executing their rights to self-defense. This is their position, and I guess a lot of media is presenting one-sided information rather than basing themselves on facts and basing themselves on first-hand documented materials. And this is how it is. It happens every time there are some clashes between the parties. So the media starts, and it is not only the British media, there are also a number of Russian newspapers and media that I have been following that are writing that, yes, it's Armenia that started. But I guess it's just a very unprofessional approach from several media agencies to present one-sided information and state endorsed information, I would say, rather than basing themselves on facts. Such as, for example, I would say that The Guardian has recently published a very full article about which is based on facts. So their journalists went to Syria and Libya and talked to people that are working to employ these terrorists that they're sending to different countries through certain private companies. Apparently, this is a business model. So this journalist went and checked on the ground, spoke with people who are actually dealing with these situations, and then reported. So I would say that all the people that are involved in this directly or indirectly or concerned should be spreading the information from independent and verified sources rather than spreading information that is endorsing state-sponsored information.
Absolutely. I'm glad to say that in Britain, the article in The Guardian, and there was a reasonably balanced article in The Times today, have
yes,
both
exactly.
balanced.
Yes.
And
also Reuters has been speaking, yes.
Yes. So that's a little bit of comfort that at least your side of the terrible tragedy is being
and
told.
Actually, I am very surprised to see this because during the previous clashes, this was never the case. So I guess there is a positive tendency from reputable international media to actually follow verified facts and sources and diffuse the information that is correct rather than every time saying, publishing articles saying that the Armenian government is saying this, the Azeri government is saying this, and there are some clashes between the parties. This is not the information that has to be delivered to the people, to humanity. But rather it should be, as I said, independent from both governments and verified, credible.
How would you say this particular military aggression is different from the previous Azeri attacks?
As I mentioned, it is, first of all, the scale, so the geographical scale. The scale weapon-wise, so the weapons that are being employed are really heavy. And I would say that one very important difference between this and others is the role of Turkey. The role of Turkey has been criticized and talked a lot on international media, and today it was directly mentioned by President Emmanuel Macron in Latvia when he was giving an interview to journalists. So there was a clear active role from President Erdogan within the month of August and September about their alliance. So the alliance of Turkey and Azerbaijan, and the fact that Turkey supports Azerbaijan unconditionally in everything. And this support is reciprocal because also the president of Azerbaijan announced recently calling the Greek, new appointed Greek ambassador that he wants to tell him that they support the Turkish claim in Eastern Mediterranean regardless of anything. So this unconditional support both ways is unprecedented. Of course, Turkey was always supportive to Azerbaijan, but it was only verbal. Right now, there are also actions next to the words. So we have proof that there is a lot of Turkish weapons being employed right now. There is information that also the Turkish delivery of mercenaries and terrorists, as I mentioned, to Azerbaijan. This is also unprecedented, even though during the war of 1992 to 1994, before the ceasefire, a lot of terrorists were again fighting against Armenians during the war, from Afghanistan, from Al-Qaeda, etc. But it wasn't anything that we were worried about until now. And several independent journalists have been alarming about this 2-3 weeks ago. And then some sources started to check, and it turned out to be true, actually. And we have proof that a lot of mercenaries have been killed on the battlefield right now. The fact that also President Aliyev of Azerbaijan has been speaking in a very maximalist tone about the negotiations, calling that negotiations are failing and the co-chairs are not doing anything. But the fact that if you're saying that the only solution is the solution within the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, you can't negotiate anything, because there were agreed 3 principles. Principle of non-application of fire, so there is no recourse to war or anything. Peace is the precondition. Second condition was self-determination of nations. And third was territorial integrity. So based on these 3 principles, Minsk co-chairs was conducting almost 26 years negotiations. And negotiations were happening, parties were discussing, but recently a maximalist policy of speaking about this conflict and saying that the only solution that can be accepted is within the territorial integrity. So this is actually a very worrying tendency. It has been worrying Armenia for a while. And I guess that if we look back, there are a lot of signs on this conflict escalating. This war that we're seeing right now, already the 4th day, is not a result of just 1 week, or it has been, there was this feeling that the tensions are rising for a while, and also the immense weaponization of Azerbaijan, the immense delivery of weapons from Israel, from Turkey. This has been something that was already happening for a while and was worrying. So the difference with the other conflicts, coming back to your question to conclude in several points, I would say is the role of Turkey, moral-wise and material-wise. So it's not only words, it's actions, and it's participation, it's direct participation. Second, it's the ongoing maximalist and nationalist rhetoric of Azerbaijan's president. And third, it's the massive weaponization. So when the party is weaponizing itself a lot, it has to also diffuse it. So it has to put it in use. You're not weaponizing yourself just to keep it there in the stock. You're weaponizing it to use. And also the participation of several mercenaries brought from Libya and Syria. So these 4 key things are the difference with the other clashes that happened.
Just on that point, one comment. In the really intense war from 90 to 94, and I was there many times, as I think you know, I did then see Turkish tanks being used by the Azeris. And they were manifestly Turkish tanks, and the Young Turks signed on them and so on. So in that war, I think Turkey did provide weaponry. I think in the more recent ones, it hasn't until now, but it's obviously a very serious escalation.
Yes, indeed. But this time in August, there have been also military exercises between Turkish and Azeri armed forces. And the Armenian government has been alarming about the fact that the weapons that have been brought by Turkey were left in Azerbaijan. They were not taken back. So a lot of the weapons that are being used right now are Turkish weapons, and this massive weaponization that I'm talking about is the difference with the other times.
How do you see Russia's role at the moment?
Well, first of all, in the conflict, Russia is one of the co-chairs of OSCE Minsk groups that are responsible for mediation efforts. And from day one, Russia's foreign ministry was the first one to react to the escalations, calling the parties to de-escalate and to come back to negotiations. So Russia is keeping a very balanced role as for now, until now, by not taking sides, and which is actually also bringing some discomfort from the Armenian side, because the Armenians are really tired of hearing this both sides rhetoric of not saying anything, because Armenia as such, and it has been also voiced by a lot of academics that have been studying this conflict, Armenia doesn't have any motive to escalate, because we want peace, and we benefit from status quo. We benefit from peace, and we want negotiations, and we want to negotiate a lasting and sustainable solution. And Armenians are very tired hearing the co-chairs of Minsk Group especially, and OSCE, which are responsible for mediation efforts, to every time say that we call on both parties to refrain from use of weapons. Mm-hmm. So also understanding that, of course, Minsk co-chairs, they have to keep very neutral role in order to be able to mediate. But when the red lines are crossed, which have been crossed this time, the criminal should be named as criminal. You can't ask the victim to refrain from use of weapons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. What kind of support can Armenia get from other countries?
Well,
but apart from the diaspora.
Yes. Well, first of all, from day one, the Armenians in Armenia and in the diaspora, and also the diaspora organizations, especially in the United States and France, have been calling their representatives and their governments to react fast and effectively. So this is what Armenians want from international community, international organizations. So the UN, UN Security Council had a meeting yesterday, in fact. From all these organizations and governments, what we want is to call things as they are and put pressure on the aggressor to end this, because we don't want war. And there are a number of reasons why we don't want war. Because, as I said, status quo is extremely beneficial for Armenia, and destabilizing the region is beneficial for someone else. Yeah. And someone else is starting to be named.
Yeah. And other people may have other questions as well. But one of the things I would like to ask you is, what would you say to the British people if you give them a message, and what would you like the British government to do? Because Max is brilliant at putting all these things out on social media and everything to get the message out. So if you had a special request for people in Britain, what would be your request to the British people? And then what might be your request to the British government?
Well, the request would be to act effectively and fast, and for the British people to call probably their representatives in the parliament, and also the parliament to call on the government and the foreign affairs department and the minister to put the pressure that the UK as a member of NATO can, to influence Turkey to not intervene in the conflict, because this is really it brings a lot of issues that we haven't seen in any other escalation, and I don't think that the region and the world is ready for such a massive escalation of violence in this region. So while Britain is far away geographically, if this conflict actually escalates to a point where Turkey is actively, directly involved in it, there can be consequences that no one can predict. So what I would say is, number one thing, to call on the government as a NATO member, to ask another NATO member to put political pressure to refrain from intervening in the conflict. And second, to actually bring the parties into negotiations table, which I think that Britain has the diplomatic means to do that. Despite it not being member of OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, it has some influence. That I see that this can, there are two means to resolve the conflicts. There is either via weapons, which is happening now, and via talking, diplomacy. So when being asked how you see this being solved, I think that both means can be employed, but one has massive humanitarian consequences, and the other one is just talking and coming to a consensus. So I think that powers should put political pressure to bring parties back to negotiations table. And this is the only way forward, unless there is another humanitarian huge crisis coming in. And it is already on its way. As I said, a lot of civilian structures have come under fire, and civilians themselves.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't give the others a chance to ask questions, but they were the questions identified by Andrew. But is there anything else you'd like to say, and or might it be helpful to have another Zoom call to hear how things are going on another day?
We can have another Zoom call as well, but my short message would be that I really hope that this crisis this war can be stopped as soon as possible, because the human sufferings are really huge and the distractions are huge, and I really hope that the people that have the power to stop it can actually and will actually use it to do.
I can tell you that we are working very strongly with the government, with Parliament, and so we're doing everything we can. I will send you, we have your email, statements we've made, and a letter I'm about to write to the Foreign Office. So we will keep you informed of what we are trying to do. And if you can think of anything we should do, which we're not doing, please let us know. And if you want to improve anything we do, please let us know.
Of course, thank you.
And the debate, there was a question in the House of Lords today. They didn't choose me to speak, funnily enough, but it was quite balanced. It was more balanced than I dared to hope. And in fact, it was almost pro-Armenia. So that is a little bit encouraging. So we'd like to give you a word of encouragement in the middle of your suffering, which we do really care about and pray about. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you too. Thank you too for inviting me.
Well, thank you. We'll be in touch soon and often. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.